G'day guys, Chronicles of Solid here. Hope you're all doing well and welcome back to another episode of Adventure News. We've got plenty of great stories to talk about. Of course, the big one is Kawasaki have just released a brand new small adventure bike called the KLE500. We've also got Ducati caught out testing an updated version of the now iconic Desert X. Yamaha are also refreshing the World Raid. And lastly, some local news. Kove is coming to Western Australia. So let's get into all things adventure news for October 2025. Also guys, my merch is available. If you want a hat, a shirt, a mug, whatever it is, head over to the store. We ship internationally. It'd be great if you could help out the channel. And back to the news. Okay, let's just talk about the KLE500 straight out of the gate. That's what we're probably all here for anyway. Let's go through the specs first so we're all on the same page. So the KLE500 ticks a lot of boxes. For one, it's a parallel twin, 451 cc's. Although it does miss out on getting the 270-degree firing order, it's just got a traditional firing order like the existing Ninjas do, from which this engine is derived. It's got that all-important 6-speed gearbox. It's got a slipper clutch as well, switchable ABS, so another tick there. It's got a 21-17 wheel combos, and not only that, but they're spoke wheels as well. But unfortunately, at this early stage, they are tubed. There's no mention of whether you can get a tubeless version, at least yet. So suspension travel is fairly adequate as well. Up front, you've got 210 millimeters or 8.3 inches. Kawasaki's made no mention though of any adjustability up front on the forks. At the back, we've got 7.9 inches, which translates to about 200 millimeters of clearance, and preload is noted as the only adjustable feature on the rear suspension. Now, generally speaking, I would assume if they haven't noted that there's any adjustability, there probably isn't going to be so, because if there was, you'd note that Kawasaki would be very proud of it at this end of the market. The ground clearance though is a little bit questionable. We've got 6.8 inches of ground clearance, which translates basically 173 millimeters. Now to put that in perspective as how that stacks up with little adventure bikes like the Himalayan 450 or the CF Moto 450 MT, the Himalayan behind me has about 230 millimeters of ground clearance, and the CF Moto 450 MT has about 220 millimeters of ground clearance. So this Kawasaki is significantly down on ground clearance compared to those two bikes. It's quite similar, but still a little bit lower than Honda's NX500. It's got a 15.9, call it 16 litre fuel tank or 4.2 gallons. And braking doesn't seem to be anything amazing. We've got a single front disc, 300 millimeters with a dual piston caliper, and a 230 millimeter disc with a similar dual piston brake caliper at the rear. They've also shown two models here, so you get a basic model and then you get an SE model, which gets nice things like a TFT screen, LED lights all round, a special graphics kit just for the SE model. It also gets a larger skid plate, taller windscreen, proper metal reinforced handguards as well, which is a nice touch. Now, the base model comes in at about US $6,600, and the SE version comes in at US $7,500. Now, the elephant in the room, and this really could be an elephant when we do find out this spec, is they haven't listed the weight. I would not get your hopes up. There's lots of people talking about this being the unicorn, and finally Japan has released a capable off-road parallel twin adventure bike to go up against the CF Moto 450 MT. And this is where I enter my take. So I think this bike is going to weigh roughly the same as the CF Moto 450 MT, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, but it certainly isn't going to be like the KTM 390 Adventure R. At least I don't think so. I would love to be wrong. If that happens, I will be very excited, but I would expect this to be at least plus mid 180 kilograms, probably in the 190 kilogram mark, somewhere around there. And that brings me to what kind of bike to expect from this, because I think there's a lot of people that are really hoping this is basically going to be the Japanese version of the CF Moto 450 MT. Highly dirt capable, really good suspension, ready to tackle pretty much anything as long as you've got the right mindset. CF Moto 450 MT is a fantastic package, and it's very popular for good reason. I loved it when I test rode it. But I don't think this Kawasaki KLE500 is the Japanese 450 MT. I'm not trying to disappoint you, I'm trying to set your expectations. What I think this bike is going to be is the Honda NX500 or CBX500 that we always wanted. I think this will basically be that real sweet spot for people that were thinking about a CB500X, but the lack of spoke wheels, proper suspension travel, and that little bit less off-road capability that some people wanted, now you have the KLE500. Aesthetics wise, I think they've done a really good job here. So I actually really think Kawasaki have done a good thing here. A lot of people have got a little bit disappointed as they've realized that this isn't as off-road capable as they've wanted. What I think you've got here is a very smart move by Kawasaki. They've looked at what they have available and what they can modify to make an adventure bike, and they've thought, hey, Honda hasn't bothered to do the spoke wheel version of the NX500. Why don't we just make that bike with our existing platform and see what happens, because that is answering a need. And this, I think, is a really positive thing for the market, for the small displacement market particularly, because it means our end of the market is developing, because now we've got that full spectrum of bikes in the small displacement category, which is something I've always been really frustrated with. There's not been too much that have been middle ground. That is something that makes sense more for adventure touring, but with still some off-road capability that's a little bit better than the 500X, that nice balance. And if you want to get an idea of how good this KLE500 could be, Nick at Rubber Dust, as he sometimes does, has set through some concepts doing his whole graphics kit, but he's also been able to shave 10 kilos from the bike. Now there is an official weight, but just from the parts that he's put on it, at least in theory, in his programming, as well as raising the suspension travel, he's made himself a KLE500, which I think is fantastic. So Kawasaki, if you're watching, please pay attention to Nick at Rubber Dust. I think that is an amazing concept, and I just wanted to chuck it up because it looks fantastic. But I'd love to know your thoughts. Where do you sit? Are you one of the people that were hoping it was going to be competition for the 450 MT? Are you finally happy that one of the Japanese manufacturers has made a proper adventure bike with spoke wheels, 6 speeds, parallel twin, and some amount of off-road capability? Let me know in the comments section down below how excited you are for this KLE500. Next up, we've got Yamaha's Tenere 700 World Raid has received some, I would say, much needed updates to keep it competitive in the middleweight segment. One of the big ones is ride-by-wire throttle, which I think is going to be fantastic. That means we can have cruise control. And it also means we can have rider modes as well. So now you have sport, and you also get explorer mode, which is your day-to-day smoothest throttle response, taking it easy type mode. You're also now getting a 6-axis IMU, and this works in sync with the traction control, the ABS system, and the slide control system, and it measures everything and really adds to the dynamics of how all those systems work. Apparently the airbox has also been modified as well, so now you should be getting more low-end torque, at least Yamaha are claiming so. How much more? We'll have to wait and see. The other interesting thing is that the fuel tanks are the same. At a massive 23 litres, that's the appeal of the World Raid, and definitely makes the bike feel substantial and I would say very top heavy, having ridden the World Raid. Yamaha have tried to address this in this update, so the tanks are actually significantly lighter than the old models by 1.5 kilograms. Doesn't sound like much, but when you think they're just petrol tanks, that's actually quite a lot of weight to shave from that high up. The KYB suspension's also been updated as well, which is great to see. The inner tubes of the front forks are now 46 millimeters, up from the old model, which was 43. And they've also revised the spring and dampening rates. The rear suspension has been upgraded as well. You now get an extra 5 millimeters of shock stroke, and that's really about it for the updates. It isn't a complete revision, but I think Yamaha have done enough tweaks to really improve this. And if you're thinking of getting a World Raid, or you've got a big adventure trip and you need a lot of range yet off-road capability, well, Yamaha just gave you even more reason to strongly consider the Tenere 700. Start it up. Some exciting spy shots were captured of a new version of Ducati's Desert X being out tested. And the big news is it looks like it's getting a new engine, specifically the V2 out of its V2 range. So what does that mean for the Ducati Desert X? Well, the V2 is a significantly lighter engine over the existing engine that's in the Ducati Desert X and more compact than the existing engine in the current Desert X. Now, because the V2 is already available, we do have some idea of how much power this bike will make. Basically, the V2 makes about 115 horsepower and 92 Newton meters of torque, which is right in the sweet spot at the slight upper end of what middleweights are making these days. So it will be no slouch off the line. I think the other nice thing is 70% of this bike's torque will be available from 3,500 RPM. And low down torque is what we want on our adventure bikes. It looks like it's received a refresh, as well as the bodywork looks quite different. The front headlights are squared off. It looks like there's slightly less lines than the old model through the fairing. We also look like we're getting a conventional swing arm on this model that could go back to the old Desert X's swing arm, because they could be using this just for testing purposes, or they could be just going with a simpler design. The front tank looks like it is smaller than the current model. That could be true, that could not, who knows? Maybe it is going to be a slight reduction. What I will say on the tanks though is I really hope they keep that reserve tank, that additional tank that you can get on the back. I think that is just a really interesting addition and really sets the Desert X apart from its contemporaries at this point in time. It's not the first bike to do it, but I do love to see that you can add an additional tank. Being able to drop weight from just changing the engines, as well as having a very nice performing engine at the same time with a smaller form factor, just allows you to be able to fit more stuff and design stuff easier on the bike, as well as just saving weight instantly. So the Desert X was on the heavier side for a middleweight adventure bike. It was roughly the same as a Triumph Tiger 900, 220 kilograms plus. So when you put it up against bikes that are getting very close to the 200 kilo mark, like the Tenere 700, it is quite a bit heavier, and you do notice that weight a little bit. So being able to shave that weight immediately puts it ahead of the F900 GS as well as the Tiger 900. It would make the Desert X very competitive weight-wise. I don't think they're going to be shying away from off-road capability. They still looks to me like it's the 2118 wheel setup, tubeless wheels. The Brembo monoblock brakes look to be on there as well. We really will have to wait for Ducati to let us know on all the updates, but I think it's looking very positive for the second gen. It looks like improvements where improvements need to be made, but they're not stepping too far away from that iconic first Desert X. So big news for KTM, Bajaj has got approval to take over KTM, or the Pira Mobility Group, by the Austrian Takeover Commission. So that's pretty big news, but we've got further details because Rajiv Bajaj has been out in the news talking about this, who is the managing director of Bajaj Auto. And the big headline is that Rajiv Bajaj and Bajaj Auto plan to cut overhead costs at the Pira Mobility Group, so that means KTM, GasGas, Husqvarna, by over 50%. And those cuts are going to be focused on management, R&D, and perhaps even racing. If you remember previously, he made the massive statement that got us all questioning the future of KTM when he said that European manufacturing is dead. Now, he's been in a new interview and his statements are equally firm. So in this interview, he pointed out the things that Bajaj had identified that KTM had really stuffed up. So one of the first things was interesting. He pointed out how lopsided the employment strategy was of KTM, the overheads he called it. So he pointed out that KTM had 4,000 employees. And one thing that really stood out to Bajaj when they were assessing KTM was the fact that of those 4,000 employees, only 1,000 of those were blue collar, hands-on, keeping the factory running or building the motorcycles. We're all kind of white collar management style jobs. And he said that was far too lopsided, especially when the white collar jobs tend to, and in this case, are more highly paid than the blue collar workers who are actually making the things you need to sell in the first place. And he goes on to say the opportunity to reduce KTM's overhead costs by more than 50%, stating R&D, marketing, racing Operations and general management is quite high. So those things he stated, they might be getting severe cutbacks or chops completely. So he pointed out obvious things that management just made poor decisions on, like not recognizing that the COVID era of people wanting just so many off-road motorcycles had dissipated and they kept producing too many bikes. He also said that they spread the brand too thin, and he said straightforward that really it was greed from the management team of KTM, the previous, so that's Stefan Pira and his cronies. They really got too greedy in trying to push the brands in too many directions and keeping that money spigot just turning. So where does that leave KTM now though? What should we expect from the Bajaj team and KTM moving forward? It seems to me that Bajaj's first point of call will be cutting costs. They've identified how overextended KTM were and how thinly they were spread. Clearly they're going to be wanting to cut costs. His statement about the overheads, particularly of the weighting of blue collar versus white collar people at KTM, it seems to me that the white collar side are going to experience a severe culling, as well as them reining in the different arms and brands and subtypes of KTM. And I think that's a good thing, because that was the main issue, as he pointed out. They're just too bloated, spread too thin, trying to grab money wherever they could rather than focusing on the goal of making ready to race motorcycles for enthusiasts. They lost sight of that in their greed. Two things they need to do that Rajiv stated was they really need to build confidence again with their suppliers, as their suppliers have been paid a little bit of the money, but nowhere near all of the money they're owed by KTM in its financial troubles. So those relationships are really strained. So they need to show that they can pay and pay regularly for the parts they need to build the motorcycles that we love. And it all comes to a head here, as I've been asking myself, and that is, how long will KTM stay in Austria? Because it's clear Bajaj have no intention of sticking around, or at least not sticking around in the presence that they currently are at. They've stated that European manufacturing is dead. The cheaper labor pool already exists in India, so they're going to move production to the Bajaj facility. What I pointed out is that's definitely possible, but they're going to have to do a lot to get the knowledge from Austria over into India, because it's not a hot swap. It's going to take time. Bring that factory up to a level where they can make ready to race enduro motorcycles and the big shiny flagship adventure bikes and road bikes. I'm not saying it's not doable. I have faith in Bajaj Auto. They're a huge and capable company. It's just that there's obviously going to be a learning curve, and that learning curve will be a lot quicker and a lot steeper heading in the right direction if they can get that knowledge base over to India. And that's if they do choose India. Maybe they'll choose Thailand like a lot of other places like Triumph or Honda. So the main concerns that I have for KTM is, one, how much is this going to affect their racing? Because it'd be really disappointing to see them pull out in a major way, because in a lot of ways, KTM are a major factor in most motorcycle racing categories around the world. The other big question I've got is, it's clear that Bajaj are moving KTM out of Austria, but are we, the people buying these bikes, willing to pay for that ready to race ideal and that premium image if they are not really made in a premium location? Can they keep hold of that brand identity and move to a cheaper production facility? It's going to be an interesting time watching what's happening in the future KTM. I think they're in good hands. It might be rocky, but I think ultimately they're going to pull through. I'm just really excited to see what they look like in 5 years. So I'd love to know your thoughts. Chuck them down below. Kove is finally coming to Australia, specifically for me, Western Australia. So tomorrow, which will be today when you're watching this video, the Kove dealership here in WA in Midvale at Adventure On, Nelson has got the contract for Kove motorcycles, so he's having a grand opening, which I'll be showing you right now and talking about, but I'm filming this prior in the week. So let's get into how I found that, because it's pretty exciting news. I'm just back from the Kove launch at the Adventure On store, hosted by Nelson and the guys at Adventure On, and it was a fantastic day, great turnout, so many different bikes. I met a lot of people that said hey and that they watched the channel, so if you were one of those people, a big shout out to you. It was really nice to meet you guys and see such a varied bunch of motorcycles, but in particular, It was really exciting to see the Kove 450 Rally as well as the 800. There was also a couple of 450s as well, the MX versions, as well as some Stark Vargs as well, and of course that AJP PR7. And I'm really excited to get a test ride on the Kove 450. So Nelson, congratulations mate, put on a fantastic event. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and as always guys, don't forget to stay shiny side up.